In this video, you're going to be taking a look at dividing fractions by a whole number. Now, the goal for today's video is to be able to divide fractions by a whole number. And the essential question is, how do you divide a fraction by a whole number? I think you're starting to see a pattern here. Okay, so what I want you to do is open up your standards practice book and turn to page 259. And we are going to unlock this problem together. Now we're going to take a look at a real-world type problem to dividing fractions by a whole number. Okay, and it starts out saying 4 friends share 2/3 of a quart of ice cream equally. What fraction of a quart of ice cream does each friend get? Okay, so our problem here is we have 2/3 divided by 4. Now it is important to understand that 2/3 is the dividend and 4 is the divisor. Okay, 2/3 is the dividend and 4 is the divisor. Okay, now step 1, what we will do, and throughout this video I'm going to show you what 2/3 divided by 4, or what a fraction divided by a whole number is going to look like. Now there is a mathematical way of doing this where we just take 2/3 and divide it by 4 and so on, and I'll show you that, but I do want you to visualize what this actually looks like, and we're going to be using rectangles to do this. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we're going to represent have the rectangle represent our divisor, our dividend, and even the quart of ice cream. So the first thing we have to do is divide it into 2/3. So I'll just throughout this video, I'll do the best I can as far as making straight lines. Okay, so here are my lines, and what I will do is I will use a different color of ink to shade in 2/3. So this represents 2/3 here. So 1/3 and 2/3. Now, there is our dividend. That's what our dividend looks like. Okay, now it says step 2, divide the rectangle into fourths by drawing horizontal lines. Now the reason why we're dividing this into fourths is because our divisor shows us it's divided by 4. So 2/3 divided by 4. So we're just going to take these lines and divide this by 4. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Okay, now what we will do now is we are going to shade 1/4 right here of the 2/3 already shaded in. Okay, so we're going to shade in 1/4 of this section here. So 1/4 will look like this. So I did 2 out of the 8, which is simplified as 1/4. Okay, now what I do is for step 3, it says the rectangle is now divided into how many equal parts? We can see 12 equal parts total. Okay, even though this isn't shaded in, it's still part of all the equal parts. So 12 equal parts, we can see that. Let's write that in your book. Each part we can see is 1/12 of the rectangle. Of the 12 parts, how many are shaded in twice? We can see 1, 2 were shaded in twice. The rest of these were not, they were only shaded in once. These weren't shaded in at all. Okay, so we could see of the 12 equal parts, we have 2/12 or even 1/6 of the rectangle, okay, shaded in. So we could say, we'll just simplify that, 1/6 of the rectangle is shaded twice. So we can see that each friend gets 1/6 of a quart of ice cream. Okay, now let me show you what this actually looks like just mathematically. I showed you a visualization of this problem. Let me show you what it looks like if we were to just do this, just the mathematical way and not really understanding it at all. So 2/3 divided by 4. Okay, what we do is we actually change, whenever you're dividing fractions, you actually change it to a multiplication problem. So we would rewrite the dividend just regularly, and what we do is we take don't mean to put a division sign, let's put a multiplication sign there. And what we do is we multiply by the reciprocal. And what I mean by reciprocal, we know that 4 actually equals 4 over 1. So what we will do, we will take the reciprocal of that, which is 1/4. In other words, we just take the numerator and put it as the denominator, and the denominator as the numerator. Okay? So now what we do is we multiply 2 times 1, just like we normally would multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so we can see that that equals 2/12, which is right here, and we can simplify this to 1/6. Okay, so that is how it looks just mathematically. This is how it looks a little bit more concretely. Okay, so I want you to visualize what it looks like and also know how to do it as well. Okay, we're going to take a look at 3/4 divided by 2. We know the first step is we need to create the dividend. Okay, if we're doing this concretely here. So what we will do is we're going to make a shape that's divided into 4 equal parts. And since it's 3/4, we need to divide in, or I'm sorry, we need to color in 3 out of the 4 parts. So we can see what 3/4 looks like. Now, my next step is we need to divide the rectangle into halves. Okay, we're dividing this by 2. Alright, so what we will do is we'll take a straight line, horizontal line, go right down the middle there. Okay, then from here, what we need to do is just shade in half of the 3/4 that's already shaded in. Okay, so we have half of that 3/4 that's already shaded in. Okay, now what we can see, even though parts are not shaded in here, what we do, we can see of the 8 equal parts, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal parts. How many are shaded in? 3 parts are shaded in twice. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what we can see, so 3/8 of the rectangle is shaded in twice. So 3/4 divided by 2 is 3/8. Okay, so let's take a look at that a little bit more mathematically. This is, like I said, showing you how to do it or what it looks like. So we have that 3/4, and we're going to divide it by 2. And whenever we're dividing fractions, okay, we always do the reciprocal of the divisor. Okay, so we take 3/4, which is shown right here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that by 1/2. Okay, so we divide this into a half here. My 3/4, we're dividing it into a half. Alright, then from here what we do is we're going to shade in a half of my 3/4, and that's why we're doing this a half of the 3/4, because we're now multiplying this 3/4 by 1/2. Okay, and what we can see, 3 times 1 gives me 8. I'm sorry, 3 times 1 gives me 3. 4 times 2 gives me 8. Okay, so we have 3/8, which is shown right here and also right here. Okay, let's take a look at number 1 now. We have 5/6 divided by 2. Okay, now what I did first of all, I did this already. You'll need to do this right in your book on page 260. So I represented 5/6. This is what the dividend will look like. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just divide this right in half here. Okay, now I have 5/6, which I already showed you what it looks like. Now, if I'm dividing this by 2, that will change to 5/6. We're going to do the reciprocal of 2, which is 1/2. Okay, now what I will do, since it's being multiplied by a half, I need to shade in 1/2 of my 5/6 that was already shaded in. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Okay, 5 are shaded in. Now, in order to find the answer concretely, what we do is we just simply look at this fraction, look at this picture or this rectangle. It's easy to see, excuse me, that 5 of the 12 pieces are shaded in. Okay, so my answer is 5/12. Also, if we're doing this just straight numbers without any type of picture, then we would multiply 5 times 1, giving me 5, and then 6 times 2, giving me 12 for 5/12. Okay, let's do number 2 together. And what we will do now is I have it set up for you already. This is 3/4 what it looks like as the dividend. Okay, and now this is what it looks like as far as mathematically goes, just straight numbers, 3/4 divided by 3. Okay, and then we can do the multiplication, the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3, 3/4 times 1/3. Now what we will do, since this is 1/3 here, we get a different color of ink, we will divide our 3/4 into 3 sections now. Okay, now we have the denominator of 12. Okay, now you can see 3 times 4, that's going to give us 12. Alright, and then what we will do is we will just, since it's 3/4 times 1/3, we will just color in again 1/3 of everything that was already shaded in. So 3 out of the 9 representing 1/3. Now that we've done that, we can easily see that my fraction 3/4 divided by 3 is 1, 2, 3 out of 12 pieces shaded in total. So 3/12, and that can be reduced all the way down to 1/4. Okay, so for number 2, my answer is 1/4. Okay, let's take a look at number 3, and I want you to do that with me. We have 2/3 divided by 3, so the first thing we need to do is represent 2/3 with our rectangle. Okay, 2 out of the 3 pieces are shaded in. Alright, so 2/3 divided by 3 here with my division problem. Now we're going to take 2/3 and we're going to multiply that by 1/3. So since we are multiplying it by 1/3, what we need to do is we need to divide our section here, our 2/3, into 3 sections now. 1, 2, 3 sections. And what we need to do now is we need to color in 1/3 of my 2/3 section that was already shaded in. Okay, so I have a total of 6 spaces here. So that means I'll color in 2 out of 6, giving me 1/3 of that section. Okay, so we can see that we have a total of 9 spaces here, and we can see that 2 out of the 9 spaces are shaded in. Okay, so my answer is 2/9. Now doing this mathematically, we can see we did the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3. We do 2 times 1 equaling 2. And then 3 times 3 equaling 9 for 2/9. Now that we have done a few of these problems together, I want you to do numbers 5 through 9 all by yourself. And when you're finished with these problems, you can press play. I want to have the answers for you. So pause the video now. Okay, and I have the answers for you for numbers 5 through 9. I want you to check them and make sure they match up with yours. If you are a little off on your answers, or you're seeming that you're not really understanding this, I want you to rewind the video, go back, go through some of these problems again with me, and then see if you can understand it. Now, to finish up the video, how do you divide a fraction by a whole number? And what we did is we drew a rectangle, we modeled the dividend by drawing and shading the columns, and then divided the rectangle into the same number of rows as the number in the divisor. And then double shade that part of the dividend, and that is how we divided the fraction by a whole number. And I even showed you the mathematical way, just straight numbers, on how to do this, but I also want to show you the concrete way as well. So if you have any questions about dividing fractions by a whole number, please come and see me.